The river edge looks forgiving in the way only tropical rivers can. The water is tea dark from dissolved tannins, its surface unbroken except for the lazy drift of leaves and the faint shimmer of reflected canopy. At knee depth, it feels manageable, cool against the skin, the bottom a mosaic of sand and decomposing plant matter that seems firm enough underfoot. The forest crowds close behind you, buttress roots arching like ribs, lianas hanging in loops, cicadas grinding out their metallic rhythm. It is an edge habitat, a seam between forest and floodplain, and like all seams in nature, it is unstable. The ground here is not a single surface, but a layered compromise between land and water. Fine sediment deposited during floods, undercut banks carved by current, root mats woven by grasses and saplings that trap silt above voids of open water. It looks solid because the surface is intact. It fails because the structure beneath it is not. When you step forward and the earth liquefies, the sensation is less dramatic than expected and more treacherous. The bank does not explode, it sighs and gives way. Your weight collapses the roof of a pocket hollowed by slow erosion, and the water that fills it surges upward. Your knee drops, your center of gravity shifts, and in the reflex to catch yourself, your face strikes the surface. The human inhale that follows is not a choice. It is a brainstem command triggered by surprise and the sudden splash across the nose and mouth. That inhale draws not only water, but the suspended life of the river margin, fine silt, fragments of decayed leaves, microbial films, into your mouth and throat. The sensation is immediate and abrasive. The particles scrape the back of the throat, trigger cough receptors along the airway, and sting the eyes with tannin-laced water. Your breathing rhythm, which seconds ago matched the forest's steady pulse, fractures into a staccato of coughs and shallow gasps. This is the SILT choke moment, and it is mechanical rather than theatrical. You are not yet drowning in the cinematic sense. Your lungs are not filled. Instead, your body is caught in a loop. Each cough is a forceful exhalation designed to clear the airway. Each subsequent inhale, because it is shallow and hurried, fails to draw in a full volume of clean air. The diaphragm, a dome-shaped muscle evolved for controlled ventilation, spasms under competing commands, expel irritant, regain oxygen, stabilize posture. Panic is not an abstract emotion here. It is a physiological cascade. Carbon dioxide levels rise with every incomplete breath, and the brain interprets that rise as urgency. Urgency accelerates breathing. Accelerated breathing increases turbulence in an already irritated throat, provoking more cough. The loop tightens. You are fighting for air, not because the river has claimed you, but because your own protective reflexes are colliding. In the dark water a few meters away, a shape does not move. The black caiman, largest predator of these floodplains, has evolved for this exact arithmetic of disturbance. Its body is a study in energy economy. Osteoderms armored across the back, eyes and nostrils positioned high on the skull, a heart capable of shunting blood flow to conserve oxygen during submergence. The caiman does not need to patrol constantly. It practices stillness as a hunting strategy, allowing the river to bring information to it. Vibrations travel efficiently through water, and the lateral line system, tiny pressure-sensitive receptors along the jaw and body, translates splashes into spatial data. In the turbid margins where visibility is low, sound and vibration are more reliable than sight. Thrashing is not just noise, it is a broadcast. Ambush hunting in caimans is an exercise in probability rather than pursuit. They position themselves where prey must pass, narrow channels between root tangles, the mouths of side creeks, the soft banks where mammals descend to drink. The river edge is deceptive for prey species as well as for you. During the wet season, floodwaters undercut banks, creating overhangs that appear solid from above. Root mats trap sediment, forming platforms that support small animals until a heavier body steps onto them. For a capybara or deer, a misjudged step can mean a stumble. For a human, it can mean face-first immersion. In both cases, the result is the same from the caiman's perspective: a sudden spike in surface disturbance. The mathematics are simple. A splash increases the radius within which the caiman can localize you. Repeated splashes refine that location. Each thrash produces a new set of waves that intersect and amplify, painting a map in pressure gradients. The caiman's brain, tuned by millions of years of selection, interprets that map with efficiency. It does not need to see your outline, it needs only to know where the disturbance persists. In this sense, panic is a predator's ally. Thrashing wastes oxygen for you and expends almost none for the caiman, which can remain submerged for extended periods thanks to a metabolism adapted for intermittent hypoxia. Its heart can slow dramatically, reducing oxygen demand, while specialized valves in the throat prevent water from entering the airway during submergence. Stillness costs it little. Your movement costs you everything. River edges are productive zones precisely because they are unstable. Nutrients from upstream settle here. Leaf litter accumulates and decomposes. Fish forage in the shallows for invertebrates. This productivity draws herbivores to drink and predators to hunt them. It is an ecological bottleneck, and bottlenecks concentrate risk. Undercut banks form where currents erode the base of the shore, leaving a fragile lip of soil above a cavity. Root systems from riparian plants lace through this soil, temporarily reinforcing it. But roots also create channels where water seeps and widens voids. From above, the surface may appear continuous, but beneath it can be a honeycomb of saturated sediment and open water. The physics are unforgiving. Once the support is compromised, gravity does the rest. As you struggle to regain footing, each attempt to push up churns the bottom. Fine sediment clouds the water, reducing visibility further and increasing the density of particles in suspension. The more you move, the more the water becomes a medium that resists clarity. Your coughing draws attention not only acoustically, but visually, sending ripples across the surface that catch the low-angle light filtering through the canopy. The forest seems to lean in. Birds lift briefly from branches at the sudden commotion, and then settle again. The river, however, does not reset so quickly. Caimans are ectothermic, relying on external heat sources to regulate body temperature. During cooler mornings, they bask on banks to raise their metabolic rate, enhancing digestion and responsiveness. In the heat of the day, they retreat to water to avoid overheating. This thermoregulatory behavior ties them intimately to the river's margins, making these zones both resting sites and hunting grounds. A caiman positioned near a soft bank may have selected it not only for prey traffic, but for thermal advantage, a shaded pool adjacent to a sunlit log. Evolution does not waste opportunities, it layers them. When the caiman decides to move, the motion is economical and sudden. A single sweep of the tail, a surge propelled by muscular hind limbs, and the distance between predator and disturbance collapses. Yet even here, the caiman is selective. It does not charge at every splash. Energy, though conserved, is still finite. The animal assesses size, duration, and pattern of disturbance. A brief slip followed by stillness may not justify action. Prolonged thrashing, irregular and intense, signals vulnerability. In prey species, such thrashing often precedes exhaustion. In you, it signals a body caught in the panic loop, oxygen debt mounting. The irony is that stillness, so difficult in the grip of SILT and cough, would serve you better than frenzy. Controlled breathing, slow movements, minimizing surface disturbance. These behaviors reduce the acoustic footprint you cast into the water. They also stabilize your own physiology, allowing carbon dioxide levels to normalize and the diaphragm to regain rhythm. In many predator-prey encounters along river edges, survival hinges less on speed than on restraint. A deer that freezes at the first hint of a caiman's eyes may avoid triggering the strike reflex. A capybara that slips but regains composure quickly may step back without escalating the event into a signal flare of splashes. The black caiman's role in this ecosystem extends beyond individual hunts. As an apex predator, it shapes the behavior of prey species, creating what ecologists call a landscape of fear. Animals adjust where and when they drink based on perceived risk, often favoring open banks where visibility is greater over vegetated edges that conceal predators. This behavioral shaping influences plant communities, nutrient distribution, and even erosion patterns. By simply being present and occasionally successful, the caiman engineers the flow of life along the river. In the end, the river edge remains what it has always been, a place where water and land negotiate boundaries that shift daily. The softness underfoot is not a trap designed for you, but a byproduct of flood pulses and root growth, of sediment settling and currents carving. The silt that invades your throat is the same silt that nourishes floodplain forests downstream. Yet, in the moment of misstep, these neutral processes align into hazard. The caiman does not need malice, it needs only physics and patience. As your coughing subsides and your breathing steadies, the water resumes its surface calm. Whether the caiman advanced or remained still depends on variables invisible to you: distance, size assessment, prior feeding. But the lesson embedded in the encounter is ecological rather than dramatic. River edges are deceptive because they are alive, continuously reshaped by flow and growth. Thrashing wastes oxygen because oxygen is a currency your body must spend wisely, especially in environments where predators translate motion into opportunity. In the Amazon, survival often belongs not to the strongest swimmer or the fastest runner, but to the organism that understands the mathematics of stillness. The river margin appears calm in late afternoon light, its surface broken only by the faint dimples of insects and the drifting shadow of overhanging leaves. The water is ankle-deep, warm from hours of sun, and laced with suspended silt that softens every contour beneath it. The bottom is a mosaic of shells, small stones, and decomposing plant matter deposited during the last flood pulse. It is the kind of place where you wade without ceremony, trusting that shallow water offers a margin of safety. The forest hums in layers behind you, distant howler monkeys rolling their calls through the canopy, cicadas vibrating the air with metallic insistence. Nothing in the scene suggests urgency. The cut begins as an afterthought. A fragment of shell, nearly invisible against the sediment, presses into the soft pad of your toe. The pain is sharp but minor, the kind that barely interrupts thought. You shift your weight reflexively, and in doing so, your foot skids on algae-slick stone. The slip is small, but it carries you sideways into a submerged rock. Skin scrapes. The original cut opens wider, and a thin ribbon of red unwinds into the water. It is not a dramatic bloom. In black water tinted with tannins, blood diffuses quickly, losing its brightness as it threads through suspended particles. Yet even a trace is information. Piranhas patrol these margins not as mindless frenzy machines, but as schooling fish attuned to opportunity. The red-bellied piranha, common in many Amazonian floodplains, is an omnivore as much as a carnivore, feeding on fruits that fall from overhanging trees, seeds, invertebrates, and occasionally fish or carrion. Their reputation as relentless attackers overshadows a more nuanced ecological role. In the flooded forest during high water, they disperse widely, foraging among submerged trunks and roots where fruits rot and insects gather. As water recedes, they concentrate in channels and lagoons, forming loose schools that provide both foraging efficiency and protection from larger predators such as caimans and river dolphins. The faint trace of blood in the shallows is not a dinner bell in itself. Piranhas rely heavily on vibration and sound to locate prey, using a well-developed lateral line system that detects pressure waves in water. The commotion of a struggling animal sends out pulses that carry farther than chemical cues alone. Yet blood, even diluted, can sharpen their attention, especially in turbid environments where visibility is limited. It is not the drop that matters most. It is what follows. As you realize you are bleeding, the mind fills in gaps with stories learned long before this moment. Images of skeletal cattle stripped to bone in seconds, exaggerated by folklore and media, flash unbidden. The body responds as if those images are imminent reality. Heart rate climbs, breathing accelerates, and the simple act of standing becomes urgent. You attempt to move quickly toward shore, but haste in shallow water invites instability. The same slick algae and shifting silt that caused the initial slip now complicate retreat. You stumble again, splashing heavily. Muddy water surges upward, and in the reflex to gasp, driven by surprise more than necessity, you draw in a mouthful of river. This is the true silt choke, not an overwhelming flood, but a cycle of panic that disrupts breathing rhythm. The cough that follows is forceful, meant to clear the airway, but it leaves the throat irritated and partially constricted. The next inhale is shallow and hurried. The chest tightens, not from lack of oxygen, but from the mismatch between rapid breathing and incomplete ventilation. Hyperventilation begins to set in, lowering carbon dioxide levels in the blood and producing lightheadedness. The throat, still raw from muddy water, feels half-closed, and each breath seems insufficient. You attempt to reset, to draw a slow, full inhale, but the body resists. Urgency overrides deliberation. In the water around you, small shapes shift. Piranhas are not charging en masse. They are circling cautiously, responding to vibration. The splashes you create are more compelling than the faint chemical trace. Fish are exquisitely sensitive to irregular movement patterns, which often signal injured prey. A healthy capybara entering the water does so smoothly, with steady strokes. An injured animal thrashes unpredictably. Your movements, amplified by fear, mimic the latter. The multiplier effect begins not with teeth, but with turbulence. Ecologically, piranhas serve as both predators and scavengers. accelerating nutrient recycling in river systems. When floods recede and fish become stranded in shrinking pools, piranhas help prevent disease by consuming weakened individuals. Their teeth, triangular and razor-sharp, are designed for slicing rather than tearing, allowing efficient removal of flesh in quick bites. Yet they are risk-aware. Large animals that move deliberately are often ignored. Sudden, erratic disturbance is more likely to draw investigative nips. In this sense, fear is the catalyst that shifts them from background presence to active participants. Your breathing grows faster. Each cough keeps the glottis, the opening between vocal cords, slightly narrowed, interfering with smooth airflow. The chest burns not because lungs are filling with water, but because respiratory muscles are working inefficiently. Hyperventilation can produce tingling in fingers and lips, further heightening anxiety. The body interprets these sensations as worsening danger, which accelerates breathing further. The loop tightens. You are no longer responding to the cut alone, you are responding to your own physiology. In the muddy shallows, visibility drops as your thrashing stirs sediment. Silt clouds erase the outlines of fish and bottom alike. Orientation falters. What was a simple three-step path to shore becomes uncertain ground. Each hurried step risks another slip, another scrape. Blood, though still minimal, continues to diffuse. The water's warmth, elevated by tropical sun, increases metabolic rate slightly, adding subtle demand for oxygen at a moment when breathing is already erratic. Piranhas, sensing continued disturbance, edge closer. Their schooling behavior is fluid. Individuals dart in and out, testing boundaries. It is important to understand that serious attacks on humans are rare and often associated with extreme conditions: drought-induced crowding, deliberate baiting, or intense feeding competition. In most cases, bites are minor and exploratory. Yet even minor bites can compound panic. A sudden nip to an already scraped toe can trigger a reflexive jerk, destabilizing balance further. The fish become multipliers not because they are relentless predators, but because their presence magnifies human error. Predator-prey dynamics in these waters often hinge on thresholds. A wounded fish that flutters briefly may escape if it regains composure quickly. If it continues to thrash, the threshold tips and multiple piranhas converge, each taking small, efficient bites that cumulatively overwhelm. The same principle applies here in a more psychological dimension. A small cut is manageable. Add fear and movements grow erratic. Add erratic movement and fish investigate. Add investigation and fear spikes again. The escalation is circular, driven more by reaction than by inherent aggression. There is a quiet irony in the piranha's role. During flood season, they disperse into flooded forests where fruits fall abundantly. In those months, they are more frugivorous than carnivorous, contributing to seed dispersal by carrying and excreting viable seeds across habitats. They are part of the forest's reproductive machinery, not merely its enforcement arm. Yet, in the dry season's concentrated pools, competition intensifies and opportunism rises. Context shapes behavior. So does your own. As you finally force yourself to slow, to plant feet deliberately, and draw a long, controlled breath despite the burn, the water begins to settle. Silt descends in lazy spirals, restoring partial visibility. The fish, sensing reduced commotion, drift outward. The blood trace, diluted beyond significance, becomes just another organic thread in a nutrient-rich system. The cut throbs but remains superficial. The crisis, magnified by imagination and reflex, recedes. The lesson in this shallow margin is not that piranhas are mythical shredders waiting for the slightest drop of blood. It is that fear, layered atop minor injury, can unravel coordination and judgment. In water, balance and breath are inseparable. Destabilize one, and the other falters. Piranhas act as ecological multipliers, responding to cues of vulnerability, but rarely initiating catastrophe alone. The true choke often begins in the chest, where panic accelerates breathing beyond control and turns manageable risk into spiraling hazard. In the Amazon, survival frequently depends on recognizing the difference between narrative and reality. Piranhas are efficient, opportunistic fish shaped by flood pulses and seasonal scarcity. They are neither villains nor passive bystanders. They respond to signals. When you thrash and gasp, you amplify those signals. When you slow and steady, you dampen them. The river does not stage spectacles, it presents feedback. And in the quiet after the silt settles, it becomes clear that the most dangerous multiplier in shallow water is often not the fish with sharp teeth, but the breath that cannot find its rhythm. By the time you reach firmer ground, you are no longer quiet. Water drips from clothing in steady rhythms. Mud sucks at your heels with each step. Your chest heaves, not from distance traveled, but from the accumulated insult of silt, cough, shock, and strain. The forest, which had earlier seemed indifferent, now feels attentive. Each cough fractures the humid air, echoing faintly through buttress roots and low understory. In an ecosystem tuned to vibration and pattern, noise is information. You are forced toward predictable exit points because the floodplain is not evenly passable. Dense thickets block some directions. Open mudflats give way under weight. Trails etched by capybaras and other animals funnel movement toward stable slopes. These corridors are not arbitrary. They are the product of repeated necessity. Where ground holds firm enough to climb, it holds firm for everyone. The geometry that constrains prey also simplifies calculation for predators. The silt choke lingers in subtler form. You are upright, breathing air, yet breathing is not efficient. The throat remains irritated. Each deep inhale risks another cough, and each cough robs you of a moment of silence. Sprinting is unrealistic. Lungs are not ready for explosive effort. Climbing is compromised by fatigued arms and slick bark. Staying quiet is nearly impossible while clearing a throat that burns. The choke has not drowned you, but it has reduced your options. Somewhere beyond the tangle of leaves and filtered light, a jaguar moves without announcement. Jaguars are creatures of thresholds, riverbanks, game trails, edges where forest meets water. Their territories often follow waterways because prey does the same. They are strong swimmers and comfortable hunters in riparian zones. Their coats, patterned with rosettes, dissolve into the mosaic of shadow and sun. In dappled light, a jaguar standing still is less an object than an absence in the pattern. Unlike pursuit predators that exhaust prey over distance, jaguars rely on proximity and precision. Their stalking gait is deliberate, paws placed softly to avoid snapping twigs. They lower their bodies, reducing silhouette. Ears rotate independently to triangulate sound. A cough in the understory is not random. It carries direction and frequency. Even if wind disperses scent, sound persists in humid air. Every pause you take to breathe deeply becomes a temporal gap in movement, a vulnerability window in which your position stabilizes long enough to be assessed. The jaguar's anatomy reflects its ambush strategy. Its forelimbs are heavily muscled for grappling, and its jaw musculature is among the strongest relative to body size of any big cat. Unlike lions or tigers that often target the throat to suffocate prey, jaguars frequently employ a skull-piercing bite, driving canines between the temporal bones of caimans or through the cranium of deer. This technique, though not universally applied, underscores their specialization in decisive force. In riparian zones where caimans and capybaras congregate, such strength is adaptive. Your presence at a predictable exit point compresses space and time. You are not a silent shape drifting randomly through forest. You are a wet, noisy animal constrained by geography. The trails that seemed convenient earlier are now corridors of exposure. Jaguars learn these corridors through repetition. They patrol them not continuously, but opportunistically, timing movements to coincide with peak prey activity, dawn, dusk, and the cool margins of day. The forest is not a static backdrop, but a dynamic schedule. The panic loop reasserts itself in subtler fashion. You try to slow breathing, but the cough interrupts. You pause to regain control, and in that pause, you imagine being observed. Imagination sharpens hearing, and every rustle becomes suspect. Heart rate rises again, nudging breathing upward. The attempt to stay quiet creates tension that tightens chest muscles, making deep inhalation harder. Each cough becomes louder against your own expectation of silence. Predator-prey dynamics here hinge on thresholds of detection. A capybara grazing near water may lift its head at the faintest crack of twig, then freeze to listen. If nothing follows, it resumes feeding. If the sound repeats in pattern, it bolts toward water. Jaguars exploit these thresholds by minimizing repetition. A single soft step, then stillness. Another step only when wind rustles leaves enough to mask it. Your cough, however, lacks subtlety. It is rhythmic and involuntary. The Amazon's complexity ensures that jaguars are rarely alone in exploiting vulnerability. Vultures watch from canopy gaps, attuned to disturbances that might signal opportunity. Caimans linger at water's edge, ready to seize prey driven back toward river. The ecosystem functions as a network of observers, yet the jaguar remains the apex expression of terrestrial stealth in this landscape. You attempt to climb a slightly elevated bank. Bark is damp and coated with algae. Hands slip. Arms lack the explosive strength needed for a swift ascent. Climbing slowly prolongs exposure. Climbing quickly risks another fall. The choke has narrowed your performance envelope. In evolutionary terms, predators often target individuals at the edges of that envelope. Young, old, injured, or fatigued. Your temporary impairment places you closer to that edge. Still, realism tempers drama. Jaguar attacks on humans are rare, often linked to unusual circumstances such as habituation or extreme prey scarcity. Jaguars typically avoid confrontation when alternative prey is available. They are not indiscriminate killers, but energy economists. A wet, coughing human may be assessed as large and unpredictable, a potential threat rather than easy prey. The forest does not guarantee predation. It presents probabilities. Yet the lesson here is not about inevitability, but about options. Breath governs options. When breathing is compromised, sprinting, climbing, and stealth degrade. Each cough is not merely noise, but a reminder of reduced capacity. In many predator-prey interactions, the moment of vulnerability is brief, a misstep, a stumble, a pause. Predators capitalize on these windows. If the window closes quickly, the prey survives. If it lingers, outcomes shift. Jaguars possess sensory adaptations tuned to twilight. Their retinas contain a high density of rod cells for low light vision, and a reflective layer behind the retina enhances light capture. At dusk, when human vision fades into ambiguity, theirs sharpens into clarity. In humid air, scent trails dissipate more slowly than in dry climates, though waterlogged terrain complicates tracking. Sound, again, becomes primary. A cough in fading light is a signal that carries farther than a footstep in leaf litter. You pause again, this time deliberately controlling breath. Inhale through the nose, slow exhale through the mouth without force. The throat protests, but begins to adjust. The cough weakens. Silence extends between breaths. You shift off the main trail, choosing a less obvious route through denser vegetation where footing, though more difficult, reduces predictability. Each step is placed carefully. Noise diminishes. In this recalibration lies survival's core principle. The Amazon does not rely solely on dramatic submersion or sudden attack. It layers small impairments, irritated airway, fatigued limbs, unstable ground, until options narrow. Jaguars thrive in this layered environment because they need only one miscalculation to align with opportunity. They do not create every vulnerability. They wait for ecosystems to do so. The forest closes around you, neither hostile nor welcoming. Somewhere within it, a jaguar may pause, listening, assessing. Perhaps it turns away, choosing a capybara at water's edge instead. Perhaps it never registered you as prey. The uncertainty is part of the ecology. Apex predators shape landscapes not only through kills, but through presence, influencing how other species move and where they rest. As your breathing steadies and steps grow quieter, the vulnerability window shrinks. Options widen again: slow retreat, cautious climb, patient stillness. The choke that began in water becomes a lesson on land. Breath is currency here. Lose rhythm and you lose leverage. Regain it, and geometry shifts in your favor. In the end, the Amazon does not always take you underwater. Sometimes it takes your breath first, and then it takes your options. The shoreline appears curated by repetition. Grass is pressed flat in narrow corridors that descend from the forest to the water in gentle arcs. Mud is tamped smooth by countless hooves, and the vegetation at knee height has been parted into an inviting gap. Compared to the dense thickets on either side, these trails look almost civilized, as if the forest itself has agreed to provide an entrance. In a landscape defined by resistance, vines catching at ankles, roots forcing detours, thorned shrubs discouraging passage, these open tracks feel like permission. They are not human paths. They belong to capybaras, the largest rodents on Earth, semi-aquatic herbivores, whose lives oscillate between grazing meadows and protective water. A capybara's body is shaped by this dual allegiance. Its dense, coarse fur dries quickly after immersion. Its eyes, ears, and nostrils sit high on the head, allowing it to remain mostly submerged while breathing and scanning. The webbing between its toes improves propulsion, and its barrel-shaped torso carries a surprising degree of buoyancy. When threatened, it does not sprint far on land. It plunges toward water and floats with ease. From your perspective, these trails are a solution. They avoid the bramble. They angle directly to a calm stretch of shoreline where the water appears glassy and shallow. The logic seems sound. Animals use this route daily. It must be stable. Yet what holds for a body designed to float does not hold for one that sinks. As you step onto the tamped mud, the surface initially feels firm. The repeated passage of capybara hooves has compacted the top layer, but compaction is not the same as structural support. Beneath the thin crust lies sediment churned and softened by repeated entry and exit. Capybaras approach these points not because they are solid, but because they are convenient transitions between land and water. They do not require the ground to bear full weight for long. Within a few steps they are buoyed by water. You, heavier and less buoyant, linger in that transition zone. Your first step sinks deeper than expected. The second drives water upward around your ankles. By the third, the crust has fractured, and your foot descends into silt that behaves more like a slurry than soil. The waterline rises abruptly. The gentle slope is deceptive. What seemed like a shallow incline hides a drop into a soft basin sculpted by hooves and currents. You attempt to step back, but the mud clings, and momentum carries you forward. The silt choke unfolds quietly. As you pitch forward, your mouth opens in reflex. A thin layer of water and suspended sediment splashes against your face. You inhale before fully registering that you are off balance, drawing in a mixture of air and fine mud. The particles sting, and the cough that follows is sharp and involuntary. Each cough narrows the airway briefly, interrupting breathing rhythm. In shallow water, the difference between a steady inhale and a mistimed gasp is measured in centimeters. Your body, startled and unsteady, struggles to coordinate the two. Capybara paths are social corridors. Herds use them repeatedly, reinforcing their shape over months and years. The animals graze in open floodplain grasses by day and retreat to water when disturbed, often as a synchronized group. Their vigilance is communal. Multiple pairs of eyes scan for movement. When alarm spreads through a herd, dozens of bodies surge toward these same entry points, sliding into water almost seamlessly. The churned mud at the base of the trail is not accidental. It is the residue of repeated, efficient transitions into buoyancy. For predators, such predictability is a map. Black caiman patrols these margins with patience shaped by hydrology. Caimans conserve energy by waiting where prey must pass. A capybara trail concentrates traffic into a narrow funnel, reducing the area a predator must monitor. The water near these points is often slightly deeper, eroded by repeated entry and exit, providing concealment. Big cats such as jaguar also learn these corridors. Jaguars are strong swimmers and frequently hunt along riverbanks, using cover to approach grazing herds before driving them toward water. An easy path for prey becomes a cafeteria for predators. As you struggle in the mud, the ecological choreography continues around you. The water is calm not because it is empty, but because it is watchful. Fish hover in the shallows, feeding on plant detritus loosened by hooves. Wading birds stand farther along the bank, aware that disturbed sediment often exposes invertebrates. The very softness that traps your foot is a productivity engine, recycling nutrients deposited by floods into food webs that sustain fish, reptiles, and mammals. Your panic loop intensifies with each failed attempt to regain footing. The mud grips tighter as you pull harder. The cough reflex keeps your throat half constricted, and breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Rapid breathing reduces carbon dioxide levels, creating dizziness that compounds instability. The instinct to hurry, to escape the perceived danger zone, drives more frantic movement, which in turn deepens your entrapment. The wrong mix of air and water continues to enter your mouth as you gasp at the surface, never quite resetting into a full, controlled breath. Capybaras, by contrast, remain composed at these thresholds. When entering water, they angle their bodies slightly upward, allowing buoyancy to support them almost immediately. Their dense bones provide ballast, but their body fat and lung volume offset much of that weight. Once afloat, they can remain nearly motionless, only eyes and nostrils exposed. They do not thrash, because thrashing wastes energy and draws attention. Evolution has tuned them to minimize disturbance at precisely the places where predators wait. The easy path illusion arises from human pattern recognition. We see repeated use and interpret safety. In reality, repeated use signals resource concentration and vulnerability. Trails in the Amazon are rarely random. They are etched by necessity: access to water, salt licks, fruiting trees. Predators map these necessities as carefully as prey do. The most worn path is often the most observed. As your breathing becomes ragged, you finally pause. Instead of lunging forward along the trail's axis, you shift sideways onto less disturbed ground. The mud is firmer a meter away, less churned by hooves. By redistributing weight gradually and aligning your torso upright, you allow your diaphragm to expand fully. A deeper inhale clears the throat of lingering sediment. The cough subsides from spasm to irritation. Stability returns not by following the path, but by stepping off it. In the stillness that follows, you notice details previously obscured by urgency. The trail's base is slightly undercut, evidence of seasonal flooding that carved a shallow trough. The water near the entry point darkens abruptly, hinting at depth. A faint ripple spreads outward where something just beneath the surface adjusted position. The forest edge is not hostile, but it is structured by use and observation. Capybaras re-emerge farther along the bank, their wet fur glistening in filtered light. They resume grazing as if nothing has changed. To them, the trail is a lifeline, a direct route between sustenance and safety. To predators, it is a schedule. To you, it was a misread signal. The Amazon rewards those who question apparent ease. An open corridor through dense vegetation is rarely neutral. It channels movement, concentrates attention, and invites ambush not by malice, but by efficiency. In a landscape shaped by flood pulses and evolutionary arms races, simplicity often masks surveillance. As the water settles and your breathing steadies, the shoreline resumes its quiet equilibrium. The trail remains visible, a narrow ribbon through grass. It will guide capybaras again at dusk, and predators will continue to monitor it. The path itself is not dangerous. It is informative. The danger lies in assuming that what is easy for one body is safe for another. In the Amazon, ease is contextual. Buoyancy alters risk. Mass alters geometry. Trails are signals, not promises. And the calm-looking shoreline, etched by hooves and habit, is often the most watched place in the forest. You finally reach air in a way that feels earned rather than assumed. Knees dig into damp soil above the waterline, palms pressed into leaf litter and roots. The river behind you resumes its muted glide, opaque and indifferent. Your chest heaves. Each inhale drags across a throat still lined with microscopic grit from earlier immersion. The irritation is not dramatic, but it is persistent, a rawness that narrows the sensation of airflow. You are not drowning, you are recovering. Yet recovery in the Amazon is rarely a quiet intermission. Sweat gathers instantly. The heat here is not a surface condition, but a presence that clings to skin. Your body, still flushed with adrenaline, produces more moisture as it attempts to cool itself. Breathing hard through your mouth feels instinctive. The nasal passages are irritated and partially blocked by water and silt, and the body defaults to the wider conduit. Mouth breathing seems like relief at first, but it alters the chemistry of recovery. Air drawn directly across the tongue and throat dries the mucous membranes that normally trap particles and regulate humidity. Each exhale carries moisture away. Thirst sharpens. The rawness intensifies. The cough reflex, primed by earlier aspiration, remains close to the surface. In the stillness that follows exertion, the smallest movements become audible. A faint whine rises near your ear, then another, then a soft vibration close to the cheek. Mosquitoes, drawn by heat and carbon dioxide, converge with quiet precision. They are not chaotic in their approach. Female mosquitoes, the blood feeders, navigate by detecting exhaled carbon dioxide plumes from meters away. The more rapidly you breathe, the more pronounced the plume becomes, a pulsing signal that guides them toward your face. Your open mouth becomes not only a conduit for air, but a beacon. The SILT choke now shifts from water to aftermath. Each attempt at a deeper breath scrapes against an irritated throat. The urge to cough persists, and coughing interrupts inhalation before it can complete. You remain slightly oxygen deprived, not because the environment lacks air, but because your breathing pattern is inefficient. Hyperventilation may have subsided, yet the rhythm is still irregular. Mouth breathing exacerbates dryness, and dryness amplifies irritation. The body longs for moisture to soothe the airway, but in humid heat, sweat replaces saliva faster than it can be replenished. Mosquitoes land with surgical intent. Their proboscis is not a simple needle, but a bundle of specialized mouthparts capable of piercing skin and locating capillaries. They inject saliva containing anticoagulants and anesthetic compounds that prevent immediate detection, allowing them to feed undisturbed for several seconds. In the Amazon basin, mosquitoes are not mere nuisances. They are vectors for parasites and viruses, participants in a web of disease ecology that has shaped human settlement patterns for centuries. Yet, in this moment, their role is more immediate and mechanical. You slap at your cheek reflexively. The movement is sharp and imprecise. The slap dislodges one mosquito but attracts another as the sudden motion and released carbon dioxide plume intensify. Each strike destabilizes your already fragile posture on the soft bank. Your knees sink slightly deeper into damp soil. The bank here, compacted by occasional animal traffic but softened by recent water contact, yields under shifting weight. In attempting to brush insects away from your face, you tilt sideways. One hand leaves the ground. Balance falters. The panic loop evolves from suffocation to irritation. Tiny bites steal focus precisely when focus is most needed. The body interprets multiple points of pricking sensation as threat. Stress hormones surge again, though the predator is measured in milligrams. Your breathing quickens in response, which only enlarges the carbon dioxide plume. Mosquitoes concentrate around nostrils and lips, where skin is thinner and blood vessels close to the surface. The open mouth, still gasping for efficient airflow, becomes an entry point not for insects, but for humid air that dries the throat further. Ecologically, mosquitoes thrive in the same floodplain dynamics that shaped earlier dangers. Eggs laid in still water hatch into larvae that feed on microorganisms suspended in pools left by receding floods. The mosaic of oxbow lakes, puddles, and shaded depressions provides endless breeding sites. In the wet season, populations explode. In the dry season, they persist in shaded margins and leaf-filled hollows. Their life cycle is intimately tied to hydrology. Where water lingers, they multiply. Predators of mosquitoes, dragonflies, fish, amphibians consume vast numbers daily, yet the insect's reproductive rate ensures survival. In this sense, mosquitoes are resilience embodied. Their presence at the riverbank is inevitable. Sweat and heat make you conspicuous among other warm-blooded creatures. Capybaras, resting nearby, twitch ears to deter them. Monkeys flick tails, birds snap them mid-air. Humans, less adapted to constant assault, react with more exaggerated movements. Your mouth breathing deepens as you attempt to inhale through irritation. Air drawn directly over the tongue evaporates saliva rapidly, creating a sensation of dryness that triggers more swallowing and throat clearing. Throat clearing, in turn, narrows the airway momentarily, provoking another incomplete breath. The cycle reinforces itself. Each cough weakens abdominal stability, and your body sways forward again. The soft bank gives way slightly. One foot slips backward toward the waterline. The danger now is not a single catastrophic event, but cumulative destabilization. Oxygen deprivation need not be severe to impair coordination. Even mild hypoxia, combined with dehydration and stress, can reduce balance and judgment. Tiny bites, individually insignificant, collectively fragment attention. You swat at one insect and inadvertently shift weight onto unstable ground. The mud beneath your heel liquefies again, and for a moment you teeter at the threshold between bank and water. The Amazon's complexity is revealed not in grand predators alone, but in the orchestration of small forces. Mosquitoes exploit the byproducts of larger struggles: sweat, breath, warmth. They are opportunists in the wake of exertion. Their bites do not immobilize, yet they erode concentration. In evolutionary terms, they shape behaviors across species. Animals choose resting sites with airflow to reduce insect load. Some mammals submerge partially to escape swarms. Even capybaras will stand belly deep in water during peak mosquito hours, sacrificing comfort for relief. You draw a slower breath deliberately through your nose despite the irritation. Nasal passages humidify and filter air more effectively than the mouth, and though they sting, they begin to restore a steadier rhythm. You resist the urge to slap at every landing. Stillness reduces the visual and chemical signals that guide the swarm. Gradually, the intensity around your face diminishes as your exhalations slow and carbon dioxide disperses less dramatically. The bank remains soft, but your posture stabilizes. Knees shift onto firmer ground a few centimeters higher up the slope. Breath deepens, less ragged. The cough recedes to an occasional rasp. Mosquitoes persist, but without frantic movement to guide them, their clustering becomes diffuse. In the broader ecology of the floodplain, mosquitoes represent a paradox. They are among the most fragile of creatures, easily crushed, yet collectively they influence the distribution of animals and the timing of activity. They contribute to nutrient cycles when consumed and to disease cycles when infecting hosts. Their smallness belies their ecological leverage. Here, at the edge of recovery, they reveal another truth. Survival in the Amazon is not only about resisting force, but about managing irritation. After the shock of water and mud, it is the aftershock, dry throat, shallow breathing, swarming insects that threatens to tip you back into instability. The battle shifts from dramatic to incremental. As the light dims slightly under passing cloud and the river continues its unbroken course, you recognize that regaining control is less about defeating the swarm and more about restoring breath. Mouth breathing, though instinctive under stress, dries and inflames, perpetuating the cough. Nasal breathing, though uncomfortable, rebuilds rhythm. Focus narrows not to the insects, but to the cadence of inhale and exhale. The mosquitoes remain part of the living margin, humming at the periphery. They are not villains, only participants in a web that capitalizes on weakness. In the layered dynamics of this floodplain, even the smallest actors can exploit moments of imbalance. And as your breathing steadies and posture firms, the aftershock subsides, not because the insects have vanished, but because control has returned to the one system that governs all others, the rhythm of air. The floodplain margin is a lattice of roots and vines, a woven architecture built by seasons of rising and falling water. Buttress roots arc outward from massive trunks, their surfaces slick with algae and darkened by tannins. Lianas hang like cables, some taut, others frayed and soft from constant moisture. The mud beneath is not simple soil, but a suspension of clay, silt, and decomposed leaf matter that has settled during receding floods. Each step into it compresses a sponge that does not rebound quickly. When your legs sink past the ankles, the mud grips not with suction alone, but with cohesion. Fine particles cling to skin and fabric, increasing resistance with every attempt to withdraw. You reach for stability in the only direction that promises it, upward. Fingers hook into fibrous roots, palms press against wet bark, and your torso tilts forward as you try to lever yourself free. The geometry of your body changes instantly. Instead of a vertical column balanced over planted feet, you become a diagonal line, weight suspended between arms and trapped legs. Your center of gravity shifts ahead of your hips. The waterline rises toward your face, not because the river has deepened, but because your posture has lowered you into it. The silt choke in this moment is self-generated. As you strain upward, your feet churn deeper into mud, releasing trapped gases and fine sediment that rise in cloudy spirals. Your arms pull, shoulders trembling under load, and each jerk of effort sends small sprays of water toward your face. Your mouth opens reflexively with exertion, and in that open-mouthed breath, you inhale a mix of humid air and atomized river. The cough that follows is less violent than in sudden immersion, but more insidious. It interrupts the rhythm of exertion. It steals seconds from the steady pull you need to stand. Mud is not passive. In floodplain ecosystems, its consistency reflects hydrological history. During peak floods, suspended sediments settle slowly as water spreads across forest floor, depositing layers that can be centimeters thick. When water retreats, these layers remain saturated, especially in shaded margins where evaporation is slow. The fine particles interlock when compressed, creating a matrix that resists quick extraction. Every attempt to yank a leg free increases the surface area of contact between skin and mud, strengthening the hold. It is less like stepping into quicksand and more like being laced into place by countless microscopic threads. As your arms bear more weight, they fatigue rapidly. Human upper bodies are not built for prolonged suspension. They excel at bursts of pulling, not at sustaining body mass against gravity and suction. Muscles burn as lactic acid accumulates. The diaphragm, already challenged by the awkward angle of your torso, struggles to expand fully when abdominal organs press forward. Breathing becomes shallow. Panic senses this shallow rhythm and interprets it as suffocation, accelerating it further. Mud holds your legs. Panic steals your breath. Your arms burn out faster than you expect. The water around you, disturbed by your efforts, clouds into opacity. Visibility drops from murky to blind. In this suspended state, you cannot see beneath the surface, only feel it. The drag of water against calves, the tug of mud around ankles. It is in such conditions that the ambush advantage of the green anaconda emerges. The snake does not rely on sight alone. It senses vibrations through water and ground, detecting the irregular tremors of struggling prey. Its body, thick and muscular, can lie coiled in submerged tangles of roots, nearly invisible even in clear water. In a silt cloud, invisibility becomes absolute. Anacondas are ambush predators shaped by the floodplain's physics. Their eyes and nostrils sit high on the skull, allowing them to remain mostly submerged while breathing and scanning. Their coloration, olive green with dark blotches, breaks up their outline among floating vegetation and shadowed roots. In the wet season, they disperse across inundated forests, exploiting expanded habitat. In the dry season, they concentrate in shrinking channels where prey traffic increases. They are ectothermic, absorbing heat from sun-warmed shallows to elevate metabolic rate before hunting. Their bodies, composed largely of muscle, are designed not for speed across distance, but for explosive force at close range. In the silt cloud you have created, coils are invisible. There is no cinematic silhouette, no warning ripple. Contact comes as pressure rather than as sight. A loop of muscle slides against a calf, cool and firm. The first sensation is not crushing, but enclosing. Constriction in anacondas is often misunderstood as bone-breaking force. In reality, it is a precise application of pressure synchronized with a prey's exhalation. When a victim exhales, the snake tightens slightly, preventing full re-expansion of the chest. With each breath cycle, lung volume diminishes incrementally until effective ventilation fails. The mechanism is efficient and rooted in respiratory physics rather than brute strength alone. In your tilted posture, with chest already compressed by angle and arms engaged in pulling, the ability to expand lungs fully is compromised. If coils encircle the torso at this moment, the challenge is not simply resisting pressure, but restoring geometry. Upright posture allows diaphragm descent and rib expansion. Forward tilt constrains both. Getting upright is the whole battle, not because verticality confers dominance, but because it restores the architecture of breathing. A body aligned vertically over stable feet can generate force downward and upward efficiently. A body bent and suspended dissipates force into water and mud. The anaconda's advantage in a silt cloud is sensory clarity. While you are blinded, it is attuned to the pattern of your struggle. Irregular splashes, rapid heartbeats transmitted through water, and the chemical cues of stress all inform its response. It doesn't need to see your outline to maintain hold. It feels your expansions and contractions through its own body. In some documented predation events, anacondas adjust coil placement to maximize control over limbs. neutralizing flailing movements before tightening around the thorax. This is not mindless squeezing, but adaptive pressure. Yet anacondas are not indiscriminate attackers of large animals. Encounters with humans are rare, and most snakes retreat when given space. The scenario here illustrates vulnerability rather than inevitability. In real floodplains, capybaras, deer, and caimans themselves are more common prey. These animals approach water cautiously, aware that margins conceal more than they reveal. They maintain posture carefully when drinking, keeping legs splayed for stability. Evolution has favored those who understand that upright geometry in mud is survival. As your arms tremble and breath shortens, the instinct is to pull harder. But harder pulling without shifting leg position often deepens entrapment. The mud's grip intensifies with forceful extraction attempts. The solution, counterintuitive under stress, is incremental adjustment. Freeing one leg by gentle rocking, redistributing weight slowly to regain vertical alignment. Each small success reduces the angle of your torso, allowing the diaphragm to expand more fully. Breath deepens slightly. Arms can then convert from desperate anchors to controlled supports. In a silt cloud, perception narrows to tactile feedback. You may feel only water's drag and mud's hold, uncertain whether a coil encircles you or whether imagination amplifies pressure. Panic magnifies every sensation. The chest, already tight from exertion, interprets even normal resistance as constriction. The mind can conjure coils where none exist, and that illusion alone can accelerate breathing beyond control. The floodplain becomes a theater where physiology and psychology entwine. The green anaconda, if present, would rely on the same principle that governs all ambush predators here. Patience, amplified by physics. It does not chase through open water. It positions where prey geometry fails, where mud impedes retreat and silt obscures warning. In these zones, the battle is rarely about strength. It is about angles, about who controls verticality. A capybara that regains footing quickly may wrench free even from a tentative coil. One that remains tilted and flailing exhausts itself into vulnerability. Eventually, whether through careful adjustment or sheer persistence, you free one leg. The shift is subtle but transformative. With a foot planted more firmly, you lever hips upward, bringing chest closer to vertical. The waterline drops from your mouth. Breath, though ragged, finds a deeper rhythm. Arms, relieved of full body weight, cease their frantic burn. The mud still clings, but its hold is no longer absolute. In that restored alignment lies the difference between ongoing panic and regained control. The floodplain edge resumes its quiet after disturbance. Silt settles. Roots glisten. Somewhere beneath the surface, fish resume foraging among leaf litter. The anaconda, if it had been near, melts back into shadowed water, conserving energy for another opportunity shaped by misalignment and obscurity. The lesson embedded in this margin is geometric rather than dramatic. Strength matters less than posture. Visibility matters less than alignment. In the Amazon's soft banks, survival hinges on restoring upright architecture, on reclaiming the simple vertical that allows breath, balance, and deliberate movement to return. In this ecosystem of shifting substrates and concealed forms, the struggle is not a contest of brute force, but a negotiation with physics. Mud resists abrupt extraction. Water magnifies imbalance. Predators exploit moments when geometry falters. Getting upright is the whole battle, because upright restores the choreography of muscles and lungs. Without it, even the strongest body becomes a diagonal line suspended over uncertainty. The black water margin seems briefly calm again, its surface dark and reflective beneath leaning heliconia leaves and thin saplings that angle toward light. Insects skate across the film tension, dimpling the mirror without breaking it. The mud along the edge has dried into a fragile crust where the last flood receded, a thin veneer over softer sediment below. It looks supportive from a distance, a natural walkway tracing the water's contour. In the filtered sun, that line appears almost deliberate, a path drawn by the river itself. Then the movement catches your eye. A flash of olive green and bronze darts from the undergrowth, drops from a low branch, and strikes the water not with a splash, but with a staccato rhythm. The basilisk lizard, slender and crested, erupts into motion. Its hind legs piston rapidly, toes splayed wide, each foot slapping the surface hard enough to create a temporary cavity before withdrawing. Water sprays backward in neat fans. For several astonishing meters, it appears to run across the river as though gravity has loosened its grip. It does not flail or thrash. It moves cleanly, arrow straight, then vanishes into vegetation on the opposite bank. The human mind, conditioned to read motion as information, interprets the basilisk's trajectory as a suggestion. That line across the water looks stable because it was traversed successfully. The crusted margin beside you looks firm because it resembles dry land. Instinct merges these cues into a plan. Step quickly along the same contour, follow the apparent safe line, put distance between yourself and uncertainty. The Amazon, however, specializes in optical persuasion. What holds for a reptile weighing less than a kilogram does not translate to a body many times heavier. Your heel strikes the crust, and for a heartbeat it resists. Then it fractures with a muffled snap. The layer was thin, dried silt fused by sun into a brittle plate floating above mud that never fully relinquished water. Your weight concentrates pressure into a narrow point, and the plate collapses. The foot drops abruptly into soft substrate. Momentum carries you forward. The other foot, seeking purchase, skids on the breaking surface. The body pitches. Arms windmill through air thick with humidity. But there is no branch within reach this time. Your face descends toward the black mirror. The silt choke here is immediate and blunt. The impact drives water upward into nose and mouth. Mud, loosened by the crust's collapse, rises in a dense plume. You inhale reflexively on the rebound, drawing in a mixture of air and fine sediment. The particles scrape the back of your throat, triggering violent coughing. Eyes sting from tannins and grit. The river, momentarily smooth, becomes opaque and abrasive. The panic loop begins with misinterpretation. You try to replicate the basilisk's clean exit by stepping rapidly along the margin, but speed compounds instability. Each hurried footfall breaks more crust, releasing additional sediment. Repeated slips follow in quick succession. Every slip forces a sharp inhale or exhale out of sequence. The cough reflex narrows the airway, making full breaths difficult. The chest tightens. Carbon dioxide rises. The mind registers suffocation where there is primarily irritation and poor timing. The more urgently you attempt to move, the more frequently you fall. Breathing never resets because posture never stabilizes. The basilisk's remarkable ability to run on water is not magic, but biomechanics tuned to mass and scale. Its hind feet possess elongated toes fringed with lateral flaps of skin. When the foot strikes the surface at high speed, these flaps expand, increasing surface area and displacing water downward. The rapid slap creates an air cavity beneath the foot, and before the cavity collapses, the lizard retracts the limb and repeats the cycle. It is a precise choreography of force and timing, dependent on low body mass and powerful hind limb muscles relative to weight. The basilisk's center of gravity is aligned for this motion. Its tail extends as a counterbalance, stabilizing pitch during each stride. Humans cannot reproduce this sequence because physics scales differently with size. As body mass increases, the force required to generate sufficient upward impulse on water grows disproportionately. The surface tension that supports insects and briefly assists small reptiles becomes negligible relative to human weight. Attempting to sprint across shallow water results not in sustained cavities, but in immediate collapse into substrate. The basilisk exploits a narrow window of hydrodynamic possibility. You do not inhabit that window. In the floodplain, such mismatches are common. Animals evolve to exploit microhabitats defined by weight, limb structure, and sensory acuity. The basilisk's habitat includes overhanging branches and narrow channels where rapid escape across water provides a direct route to safety. Predators such as snakes and birds of prey hunt along these edges. A lizard that can convert the river's surface into temporary footing gains a critical advantage. Its eyes, positioned to scan both canopy and water, detect threats early. Its muscles, warmed by tropical heat, deliver explosive power. For a human, the same environment presents inverse advantages. The crust that seems firm is deceptive because it forms from evaporated silt too thin to bear significant load. The safe line drawn by an animal's path is not a structural guarantee, but a momentary exploitation of scale. Chasing that line is chasing an illusion. The Amazon's trick is not hostility, but specialization. Animals move cleanly where humans cannot because their bodies and behaviors are calibrated to niches invisible to us. As you struggle to regain footing, each attempt to mimic the basilisk's speed leads to renewed slipping. The mud beneath the crust is now churned into slurry. Every footfall sinks deeper. Your torso tilts forward again, compressing lungs and further complicating breathing. The cough reflex persists, keeping the throat partially constricted. Even when your face is clear of water, inhalations feel insufficient because posture prevents full expansion. The loop tightens. Instability begets shallow breathing. Shallow breathing fuels urgency. Urgency drives hurried movement. Hurried movement ensures further instability. The basilisk, now concealed among leaves, remains alert but distant. It has not lured you intentionally. It has simply executed an escape honed by generations of selection. Its diet, primarily insects, small vertebrates and plant matter, ties it to the same edge habitat where fallen fruit and arthropods accumulate. During the wet season, juveniles disperse into flooded forest, where water corridors provide both refuge and hazard. Their survival depends on rapid transitions between media, branch to trunk, trunk to water, water to bank. Clean motion is their shield. The forest geometry here is subtle but unforgiving. Overhanging branches cast patterned shadows that obscure depth perception. Reflections on black water distort apparent distances. Crusted silt mimics dry ground. Root tangles create channels where footing seems guided but narrows abruptly. The geometry invites linear thinking. Follow the edge, follow the path of least resistance, yet stability often lies perpendicular to that instinct, in stepping back from the margin into firmer soil, rather than racing along it. Eventually, exhaustion interrupts panic. You pause, knees bent, hands planted against a stable root, allowing sediment to settle. The water clears incrementally. With slower, deliberate movements, you shift weight backward, away from the deceptive crust and onto compacted ground farther from the waterline. Breath deepens slightly as torso aligns vertically. The cough diminishes from convulsion to rasp. In that stillness, the lesson crystallizes. The basilisk's run across water is a spectacle born of evolutionary fit, not an invitation. Its apparent defiance of gravity is bound tightly to body mass, limb structure, and the fluid dynamics of shallow channels. Humans, lacking these adaptations, must navigate differently. Imitation in this context is not flattery, but folly. The Amazon's margins are layered with such illusions. Paths traced by animals do not promise safety for larger bodies. Movements that appear effortless are supported by invisible mechanics, surface tension, limb velocity, micro-scale hydrodynamics that collapse under different weight. Panic arises when we mistake spectacle for strategy. As the forest resumes its quiet rhythm, dragonflies skimming the water and distant birds calling from canopy, the river returns to mirror stillness. The basilisk's track has vanished without trace. Only your churned footprints mark the brief disruption. In the interplay between creature and habitat lies a reminder. Survival here depends not on copying what moves fastest, but on understanding why it moves cleanly at all. The riverbank is not a line, but a tangle. Vegetation crowds the margin in layered tiers, saplings leaning over black water, low branches interwoven with lianas, buttress roots anchoring trunks into saturated soil. The geometry here is dense and recursive. A three-dimensional lattice built by competition for light and stabilized by flood cycles that reward flexibility over rigidity. From a distance, it appears climbable, even supportive. Up close, each branch flexes under load, each vine stretches before it holds, and each foothold dissolves into mud that remembers every previous step. The forest edge is less a staircase than a spring. You lunge for a branch to pull yourself upright. It bends. The flex is subtle at first, absorbing your weight with quiet compliance. Then the stored tension releases and you rebound backward, slamming down into water that had seemed shallow a second earlier. The impact compresses your torso and forces air from your lungs in a blunt exhalation. For a fraction of a second, there is no breath to draw. The diaphragm, stunned, waits. As your body recoils upward, reflex overrides reason. You inhale sharply, trying to refill what was knocked out of you. The inhale arrives too soon, when your face is still close to the surface, and muddy spray rushes in with the air. The SILT choke here is not from prolonged immersion, but from rebound timing. Water driven upward by your own impact becomes aerosol, a mist thick with sediment that clings to lips and slides into the throat. The cough that follows is violent, driven by irritated airways and the sudden need to clear grit. Coughing forces your hands to loosen. The branch you grabbed, already unstable, slips from your grip. You fall again, this time less dramatically, but no less disorienting. Mud receives you with a soft collapse, releasing bubbles that carry the sour scent of decomposing leaves. The panic loop is mechanical. Coughing reduces grip strength. Reduced grip leads to another fall. Each fall produces another impact, another mist of sediment, another mistimed inhale. The environment itself multiplies the sequence. In tight spaces where vegetation overhangs water, there is little room to widen stance or adjust posture. Your shoulders brush branches, vines snag at wrists, roots press against shins. Every movement ricochets off obstacles. The forest geometry funnels motion into repetition. Boas are creatures of this geometry. The boa constrictor is neither aquatic leviathan nor arboreal specialist alone, but a generalist shaped by clutter. It thrives in ecotones, those transitional zones between water and forest where branches dip low and ground cover thickens. Its body, muscular yet supple, threads through narrow gaps with minimal disturbance. Heat-sensitive labial pits along its lips detect subtle thermal contrasts, allowing it to sense warm-blooded animals even in low light. In the tangled bank vegetation, where visibility fragments into patches and shadows, such sensory adaptation grants advantage without spectacle. Unlike the explosive ambush of larger anacondas, boas often rely on structural complexity to stage encounters. A branch over water is not merely a perch, but a potential anchor. When prey navigates tight corridors, its movement options narrow. Falls repeat because space constrains recovery. A deer that slips beneath a low limb may strike it with antlers and rebound. A monkey misjudging a vine may collide with neighboring branches before regaining balance. In each case, the forest's density transforms a single mistake into multiple destabilizations. As you attempt to rise again, arms trembling from earlier strain, you reach for a different support. This time, the branch holds more firmly, but your footing remains uncertain. The mud beneath shifts sideways, lubricated by water churned from your falls. Your torso tilts forward once more, compressing your abdomen against thighs. Breathing is shallow in this posture. When you try to draw a deep inhale, ribs cannot expand fully. The body interprets this restriction as suffocation and accelerates breathing. Accelerated breathing intensifies coughing when sediment remains in the airway. The cycle tightens. Boas do not need to chase through open water. They position within the lattice. Coiled loosely along a branch, their coloration, mottled browns and creams, mirrors the dapple of bark and leaf shadow. In this posture, they conserve energy, muscles relaxed but ready. When prey brushes against them in confined space, they strike with precision measured in milliseconds. The strike is short, controlled, and anchored. In clutter, prey cannot generate full escape velocity. A single coil can loop around torso or limb before momentum dissipates. Constriction in boas, as in other large snakes, is less about crushing bones than about exploiting breath cycles. Pressure tightens incrementally with each exhale, preventing full lung re-expansion. In tight vegetation, where prey collides repeatedly with obstacles, the opportunity to reset posture diminishes. Falls repeat because space constrains upward motion. The boa's advantage lies not only in strength, but in how the environment prevents a clean recovery. The riverbank vegetation also shapes thermal gradients. Sunlight filtered through canopy warms exposed branches more quickly than shaded mud. Boas, as ectotherms, select perches that balance exposure and concealment, elevating body temperature to optimize muscle performance before hunting. Their metabolism rises with warmth, enhancing strike speed. yet they remain patient, often motionless for hours. The forest geometry does the work of bringing prey within range. Your third attempt to stand is slower. Instinct has urged frantic pulling, but fatigue tempers that impulse. You brace one knee against a root, shifting weight gradually. This incremental adjustment reduces the rebound effect. When the branch flexes slightly, you absorb it rather than fight it. Breath steadies marginally. The cough softens from spasm to irritation. The forest remains tight, but you begin to navigate its constraints rather than collide with them. Cluttered margins are ecological corridors. Fish shelter beneath overhanging branches to avoid avian predators. Frogs cling to low leaves, safe from larger terrestrial hunters, but vulnerable to snakes that move seamlessly between water and limb. Small mammals forage along root tangles, exploiting fallen fruit, but risking ambush. The density that protects one species exposes another. Geometry is impartial. It creates both refuge and trap. Boas exemplify this duality. Their reproductive cycles often align with seasonal prey availability, and females may remain with neonates briefly, an unusual behavior among snakes that increases offspring survival in complex habitats. Young boas, slender and agile, occupy slightly different niches than adults, climbing more frequently and targeting smaller prey. Over time, as they grow, they transition into heavier bodies suited to anchoring against larger animals in denser clutter. The forest geometry accommodates each life stage differently. As your grip strengthens and posture rises, you feel the difference immediately. With torso more vertical, diaphragm descends more freely. A full inhale becomes possible, washing away the sharp edge of panic. The branch still flexes, but you anticipate it now, adjusting tension accordingly. Falls cease not because the forest has changed, but because your interaction with its geometry has shifted from reactive to measured. If a boa had been present within reach during your earlier tumbles, it would have relied on repetition. Each rebound, each collision with branch and vine would have limited your escape vectors. The environment narrows choices until only small, predictable movements remain. In such settings, strength alone is insufficient. What matters is orientation, how you align your body within confined space. Eventually, you step onto firmer ground, just beyond the densest tangle. The bank here is less cluttered, roots thicker and more stable. Breath returns to rhythm. Mud drips from clothing and skin. Behind you, the vegetation resumes its quiet sway, concealing whatever life threads through it. The lesson embedded in this chapter of the floodplain is architectural. In tight spaces, falls repeat because geometry channels force back upon itself. The boa does not need spectacle or pursuit. It inhabits the angles where recovery falters. Clutter amplifies small mistakes into cycles. To escape, the task is not overpowering the environment, but reading it, finding leverage points that do not rebound, aligning posture so breath and balance reinforce each other rather than compete. The forest edge, with its low branches and overhanging vines, is a living structure that rewards awareness of space. Upright stance in open water is one kind of stability. Upright stance within clutter is another. Both demand alignment more than brute force. In the Amazon's braided margins, geometry governs survival. The shallows feel harmless because they are bright. Sunlight fractures across ripples, scattering gold across ankle-deep water that barely reaches the calf. The riverbed looks simple from above, pale sand, faint ripples sculpted by current, occasional leaves drifting in slow arcs. You shuffle your feet forward, a common river habit intended to warn hidden creatures before you step down. The motion seems cautious, even respectful, a quiet negotiation with whatever shares this margin. The water is warm from the afternoon heat, and beneath it lies a layer of fine sediment that has settled through months of flood and retreat. It is a place where fish forage and invertebrates burrow, where the river's productivity concentrates in grains no larger than powdered sugar. What you do not see is the shape embedded within that sand, a freshwater stingray lying flush against the bottom, its body almost indistinguishable from the substrate. Its dorsal surface is patterned in concentric rings and muted browns that echo the play of light on sediment. The eyes rise slightly above the disc, scanning the world through a narrow field, while spiracles behind them pulse rhythmically, drawing water across gills hidden on the underside. The ray's camouflage is not passive coloration alone, it is posture. By flexing its pectoral fins, it can settle into the sand, allowing grains to drift and settle across its back until its outline dissolves. This is thermoregulation and concealment combined. Shallow water warms quickly, and the ray, as an ectotherm, benefits from basking in this gentle heat while remaining shielded from predators that patrol overhead. When your foot presses down just off-center from its body, the ray interprets the pressure not as malice, but as proximity. Its survival strategy is built around the calculus of escape. In the wild, stingrays face predators such as caimans and large catfish. Their first defense is flight. The pectoral fins, broad and muscular, undulate in a powerful wave that lifts the body from the sand in a fraction of a second. That lift displaces sediment in a sudden plume. The bottom erupts like a smoke bomb detonated underwater. Fine silt and sand billow upward in a dense cloud, transforming the clear shallows into opaque brown within moments. The explosion is not dramatic to the ray, it is routine propulsion. To you, it is disorienting shock. At the same instant, your body reacts. The sudden eruption startles you, and in that reflexive inhale, meant to steady balance, you draw in a mixture of air and atomized spray. The plume has broken the surface. Droplets of sand-laden water arc upward as the ray's wings beat against the bottom. Your mouth opens in surprise, and the inhale drags grit against the soft tissues of throat and nasal passages. Cough receptors fire again, not unlike the silt choke of deeper water, but sharper, more granular. The stingray's movement has erased the clean boundary between air and river. Now the two mingle in a haze that burns the sinuses and stings the eyes. The ray's tail, long and whip-like, trails behind as it bolts. Along its dorsal surface sits a serrated spine composed of dentin and enamel, connected to venom glands at its base. The spine is not a spear thrown in aggression. It is a defensive apparatus deployed when escape is blocked. If your foot has pinned part of the disc or trapped the tail beneath your weight, the ray may reflexively arch and drive the spine upward. The motion is rapid and precise, evolved to deter crocodilians that might otherwise swallow it whole. A puncture wound from this spine is more than a simple cut. The serrations tear tissue on entry and withdrawal, and venom containing proteins that induce intense pain and tissue damage enters the wound. The pain is immediate and overwhelming, radiating from the puncture site in pulses that seem synchronized with your heartbeat. Pain alters posture. The human body, when struck with sudden intense pain, often shifts weight abruptly to avoid further injury. In shallow water, that shift can mean losing balance entirely. The foot that was stable a moment ago lifts, the other leg, destabilized by the sediment cloud, slides. As you gasp, trying to draw a full breath through the burn of sand and the shock of injury, you find that standing upright has become a complex task. The riverbed beneath you is no longer visible. The silt cloud has erased visual reference points. What looked like a simple exit, 3 steps back to dry sand, has become a blind stumble through opaque water. Silt clouds function as ecological equalizers. For the ray, the eruption obscures it from predators that rely on sight. For fish that hunt by ambush, turbidity can provide cover. For you, however, turbidity removes orientation. Humans are visually dominant animals. Balance and navigation depend heavily on sight. When visibility drops to near zero, the brain must rely on proprioception, the sense of body position, and the feedback from feet against substrate. But the substrate here is fluid. Fine sand shifts under pressure, flowing around toes and ankles. Each step sinks slightly before finding purchase. The injury in your foot or leg compounds the problem because pain signals compete with balance signals in the nervous system. The brain prioritizes the threat, amplifying sensation at the wound while diminishing the clarity of spatial cues. The panic loop begins not only in the throat, but in the mind. Surprise triggers a sympathetic nervous response. Heart rate accelerates, breathing quickens, muscles tense. Rapid breathing in a sand-laden haze pulls more grit into the airway. The throat tightens, and each cough destabilizes you further. The venom's pain can induce a vasovagal response in some individuals, lightheadedness, nausea, further complicating efforts to remain upright. The stingray has already fled, disappearing beyond the plume, yet its defensive architecture continues to shape the moment long after it has gone. Freshwater stingrays in the Amazon basin are part of a lineage that adapted from marine ancestors millions of years ago, moving upriver and diversifying into species uniquely suited to freshwater life. Their physiology reflects this transition. Specialized kidneys manage osmotic balance in a low salinity environment, and their reproductive strategies often involve giving birth to live young rather than laying eggs, a trait that reduces vulnerability in dynamic river systems. In flood season, some species move into inundated forests, navigating among submerged trunks and roots where invertebrate prey flourish. Their sensory systems are tuned to this complexity. Electroreceptors embedded in the skin detect the faint electrical fields produced by muscle contractions of buried prey, allowing rays to hunt without sight. Ironically, the same adaptation that lets them locate hidden food does nothing to prevent a human foot from descending above them. The ray detects pressure and proximity but cannot interpret intention. The shallow margins where you stand are seasonal theaters. During high water, these areas may lie beneath meters of flow, serving as nurseries for fish and feeding grounds for rays. As water recedes, sediments settle and new microhabitats form. The fine sand that now blinds you was once suspended far upstream, carried by flood pulses that connect distant forests and tributaries. In this sense, the silt cloud is a fragment of a larger hydrological story, a reminder that rivers are conveyors of both life and risk. As you attempt to move toward shore, each step sends new ripples through the murk. Without visual anchors, your sense of direction can invert. What feels like backward may angle sideways. Studies of human navigation in low visibility conditions show a tendency to veer subtly, tracing arcs rather than straight lines. In a river margin, this can mean drifting parallel to shore instead of toward it. The simplest exit becomes a maze of soft footing and shifting currents. Meanwhile, the wound throbs, and the instinct to lift the injured limb disrupts balance further. Yet even here, restraint offers advantage. Slow, deliberate movements reduce the churn of sediment, allowing particles to settle gradually. Controlled breathing, despite the irritation, lowers the sympathetic surge, stabilizing heart rate and muscle tension. The same evolutionary reflexes that complicate the moment can be moderated by conscious control. In the wild, prey species that survive stingray encounters often do so by withdrawing rather than thrashing. A caiman that receives a defensive strike may release and retreat, reassessing rather than escalating blindly. The river rewards measured response over frantic reaction. The stingray itself, now several meters away, settles again into the sand, spiracles resuming their steady rhythm. Its defense was never an attack, but an assertion of space. In an ecosystem where predators patrol from above and below, a concealed spine is insurance. The venom deters pursuit, buying time for escape. From the ray's perspective, the encounter is brief and resolved. From yours, it lingers as pain and the memory of blindness. Shallow water deceives because it appears transparent and manageable. Yet clarity can vanish in a heartbeat, replaced by a cloud that erases edges and depth. The SILT cloud does not only obscure, it transforms the physics of the scene, turning stable ground into shifting uncertainty. A puncture wound does more than hurt. It alters biomechanics, making balance precarious. At the exact moment, clear footing is essential. In these margins, where land and water interlace, safety is less about depth than about awareness. The river does not distinguish between cautious and careless. It responds to pressure and motion. And in the brief eruption of sand and spray, it reveals how quickly visibility, literal and metaphorical, can disappear, leaving you to navigate not only the water, but the reflexes within your own body. The Blackwater Channel narrows between walls of roots and fallen branches, its surface reflecting the canopy in a dark mirror, broken only by drifting pollen and the slow glide of tannin-stained current. The water here is the color of brewed tea, rich with dissolved organic compounds that leach from leaves and bark, muting visibility below a few handspans. It feels shallow, manageable, the kind of place where you wade with caution but not fear. The bottom is soft with leaf litter and silt that has settled through countless flood cycles, forming a cushion that yields underfoot. The forest leans inward, bromeliads clinging to trunks, vines dipping low enough to brush the surface. It is quiet, in the way productive ecosystems often are, activity hidden beneath layers of shadow. When your footing slips, it is not dramatic at first. The silt beneath your heel shears sideways, and your weight tilts into the channel. Instinct sends your arm downward, fingers searching for purchase among submerged roots. Your hand plunges into water, opaque as ink, closing around something that flexes rather than holds. At the same moment, your face dips beneath the surface. The first reflex is a cough, sharp and involuntary, as tannin-laced water floods nose and mouth. The cough forces an exhalation, but before you can coordinate the next inhale, something else intervenes. The shock is not a cinematic bolt splitting the water with visible arcs of light. It is internal, a surge that arrives without spectacle. The electric eel, elongated and deceptively serpentine, has discharged a high-voltage pulse. The sensation is immediate and total. Muscles contract simultaneously, not in coordinated effort, but in seizure-like unison. The diaphragm tightens. The intercostal muscles between ribs lock, Your forearm clamps involuntarily around the body you have grasped, and your legs stiffen in the current. For a fraction of a second, control is no longer yours. The eel has not struck with teeth. It has hijacked the neuromuscular system itself. Electric eels are not true eels, but specialized knife fish, and their bodies are largely devoted to electrical organs derived from modified muscle cells. These electrocytes, stacked like biological batteries, generate voltage when activated in synchrony. A single eel can produce hundreds of volts in a high-frequency burst, enough to overwhelm the nervous systems of fish and deter large animals. The discharge travels efficiently through water, a medium far more conductive than air. In the confined geometry of a shallow channel, the field can encompass much of the surrounding space. The eel's brain coordinates this output with precision, modulating between low-voltage pulses used for navigation and high-voltage strikes used for predation or defense. Your body, immersed and off-balance, becomes part of that circuit. The shock induces tetany, sustained muscle contraction by triggering motor neurons repeatedly. The diaphragm, which must relax and contract rhythmically to ventilate the lungs, cannot perform its cycle properly when flooded with electrical interference. In that frozen instant, breathing is suspended, not because water fills the lungs, but because the muscles required to move air are locked in place. The cough you initiated dissolves into a held spasm. The timing of inhale and exhale, normally orchestrated by the brainstem in seamless sequence, fragments under electrical noise. As the initial pulse subsides, your body attempts to recover its rhythm. The brain, sensing rising carbon dioxide, commands an urgent inhale. Yet your posture in the water has shifted. The shock has destabilized you, and the surface is no longer where you expect it to be. In the scramble to right yourself, your mouth may still be below the surface when that gasp arrives. Water enters not because you intend it, but because the timing is wrong. This is the panic loop specific to electric encounters in water. Neuromuscular disruption leads to mistimed respiration, which leads to aspiration, which intensifies the urgency to breathe. The eel, meanwhile, is not acting from malice, but from evolved strategy. In predation, electric eels often employ repeated high-voltage bursts to induce involuntary muscle contractions in prey, causing them to twitch and reveal their position in turbid water. The eel then homes in on these movements, guided by both vision and its own low-voltage electrolocation pulses that map the environment. In defensive contexts, especially near the surface, eels have been observed rising vertically, pressing their chin against a threat and delivering shocks that travel more directly through the body of the aggressor. This behavior increases the effective voltage experienced by the target without any visible lightning spectacle. The lethality lies not in drama, but in physiology. In shallow blackwater channels, oxygen levels can fluctuate dramatically. Decomposing plant matter consumes dissolved oxygen, creating microhabitats where fish must surface periodically to gulp air. Electric eels themselves are obligate air breathers. They surface every few minutes to take in atmospheric oxygen through a highly vascularized mouth lining. This necessity ties them to the surface zone, the very interface where you struggle to regain balance. A repeated shock delivered near that interface can be especially dangerous because it disrupts muscle control at the moment when coordination between buoyancy, posture, and breath is critical. Muscle control in water is breathing control. On land, a loss of coordination may result in a stumble. In water, it can mean submergence. The muscles that keep your head above the surface neck extensors, back stabilizers, core musculature, must work in concert with the diaphragm and rib cage to maintain an airway clear of water. If a shock locks those muscles unpredictably, even for a second, the geometry of your body shifts. The chin dips, the mouth angles downward, and the next inhale risks drawing in liquid instead of air. Each involuntary contraction also expends energy, accelerating fatigue at a time when endurance is essential. Repeated shocks compound the problem. Electric eels can fire in rapid succession, especially when they perceive continued threat. Each pulse may be separated by milliseconds, creating a sustained barrage that keeps muscles in a state of disruption. Unlike cinematic portrayals, there is no visible arc of electricity tracing the water's surface. Instead, there is a pattern of contraction and release, a trembling in limbs, a sensation of being gripped from within. For a fish, this results in immobilization and easy capture. For a human in shallow water, it can result in loss of posture and the inability to coordinate breathing cycles. The blackwater environment amplifies this dynamic. The high concentration of dissolved organic compounds reduces visibility, making it difficult to orient visually. Roots and submerged branches create a labyrinth beneath the surface, ready to snag clothing or limbs when coordination falters. The water's warmth, often elevated by the tropical sun, can increase metabolic demand slightly, meaning oxygen debt accumulates faster during stress. Meanwhile, the eel's elongated body undulates away, conserving energy between bursts. It does not need to chase relentlessly. It needs only to create enough disruption to neutralize perceived threat. There is a subtle irony in the eel's evolution. The electrical organs that now serve as weapons originated from muscle tissue. What was once contractile machinery for movement transformed over evolutionary time into bioelectric generators. In doing so, the eel externalized the concept of muscle control, projecting it outward to seize the muscles of others. It is a predator that hunts by commandeering physiology rather than overpowering it mechanically. This adaptation is particularly effective in aquatic environments where conductivity is high and prey are often in close quarters. As you fight to regain rhythm, the key variable is not strength, but timing. If you can pause, if the eel's barrage ceases and your muscles regain responsiveness, slow, deliberate movement toward the surface can restore the breathing cycle. But panic urges haste. The brain, flooded with signals of suffocation, pushes for rapid action. Rapid action in water, especially when muscles are unreliable, often leads to further submergence. The loop threatens to tighten. Shock, spasm, mistimed gasp, aspiration, cough, instability. Predator-prey interactions in these channels are shaped by this same calculus. Fish struck by eels often exhibit rigid convulsions, floating briefly before being seized. Caimans that attempt to bite eels have been observed recoiling when shocked, releasing their grip. The eel's power does not rely on visible violence, but on the interruption of coordinated motion. In a medium where coordinated motion is synonymous with survival, that interruption is profound. Eventually, whether by the eel's retreat or your withdrawal from its range, the pulses cease. Muscles tremble as control returns incrementally. The diaphragm resumes its rhythm, shallow at first, then deeper as carbon dioxide levels fall. The water settles, black once more, hiding the eel within its tannin veil. The forest above continues its indifferent hum. Yet the lesson of the encounter lingers in the body. In water, breathing is not a solitary act. It is the culmination of posture, balance, neuromuscular precision, and environmental awareness. An electric eel's shock does not need to electrocute in the cinematic sense to be deadly. It needs only to scramble the choreography of muscles long enough for timing to fail. In shallow channels where depth seems trivial, that failure can cascade quickly. The river does not flare with lightning to announce danger. It delivers it quietly through physics and biology intertwined. And in the dark mirror of Blackwater, control of limbs, of breath, of rhythm, is the thin line between composure and catastrophe.